I completed my undergraduate degree in law in a part of Australia vastly different to where I'm now teaching in Kalgoorlie-Boulder, Western Australia. These differences are not only in terms of the geography, but also in the social issues characterising this context. As such, when I was allocated a Year 11 ATAR Politics and Law class at the beginning of this year, I was very excited and eager to learn about the experiences and perspectives of my students that have shaped their own opinions about the Australian legal and political landscape. As due to the transient and multicultural nature of Kalgoorlie-Boulder, my students come from a variety of cultural and socio-economic backgrounds, each student arriving with very different issues affecting their lives. However, a problem in this class soon emerged. What happens when students don't want to have these discussions? When classroom discussion is typically dominated by the same few students, and when contributions made are only This presentation will explore my identified learning issue, the study design I implemented for this project, detailing the use of my pedagogical intervention. I will then discuss my key findings, recommendations for future research, and the impact of this project. Classroom discussion is at the very heart of a subject like politics and law, and as such I chose this learning issue to be the focus of my pedagogical inquiry. I conducted a deep dive into the literature of how to increase safety and accountability in the classroom as I became aware that my problem could potentially be explained by an ineffective combination of these two integral concepts, safety and accountability. Safety can be defined as the extent to which a student is willing to risk public failure, and accountability can be defined as the extent to which the student knows they are going to be held account. The literature was clear in suggesting that a solution to this problem and a strategy for developing a culture of both safety and accountability in my class could be the pedagogical intervention of collaborative learning. Ultimately, I began to explore the research question: what happens to contribution to class discussion when collaborative learning is embedded into teaching? Collaborative learning has been described as occurring when students work together in small groups and everyone participates in a learning task, with the value of such strategies relying on students actively participating in negotiating roles, responsibilities, and the framework developed by Bennett and Rollheiser in 2001 for effective collaborative learning has 5 key elements. They argue that in order for effective collaboration to occur, students need to experience individual accountability, participate in face-to-face interaction, develop explicit collaborative skills, reflect on the process using metacognition, and engage in positive interdependence. My study design can be characterised into 3 stages. Firstly, the pre-test phase, whereby I mapped a voluntary contribution to class discussion and categorised such contributions into either low-level or high-level responses according to Bloom's taxonomy. I also conducted a student perception survey to ascertain the opinions of students with regard to their own perception of the teaching strategies I was currently using. Secondly, my pedagogical intervention, whereby I embedded collaborative learning into classroom sequences and lesson plans. This phase involved ensuring that I was effectively incorporating all 5 elements of effective collaborative learning implementation. During this phase, I also completed mapping of student contribution. And finally, the post-test phase, in which I mapped contribution to class discussion and categorized such contributions into low-level or high-level thinking. I also conducted a student perception survey to ascertain current opinions of teaching strategies used in the classroom. Some of the collaborative learning strategies that my students found engaging and fun included placemat, write it, post it, pile it, graffiti, and snowball activities. I ensured that my implementation of collaborative learning activities followed the 5 critical. Each collaborative learning sequence involved, firstly, establishing group norms, explicit teaching of group work skills and modelling such skills, cultivation of safety through face-to-face group work, giving students the opportunity to covertly rehearse their ideas. Students were then required to depend on their peers for input and successful completion of tasks. Students had individual accountability in their group in addition to contribution to whole class learning goals. Metacognitive reflection was used at the end of each lesson, reflecting on the success of the collaboration. Ultimately, I found that contribution to class discussion improved with the introduction of collaborative learning activities. During pre-intervention data collection, an average of 5 students contributed to class discussion per lesson. However, post-intervention data collection revealed that in collaborative learning sequences, 100% of students contributed to class discussion. With regard to the student perception survey, I found that student perception of different ways/strategies for learning modeled by the teacher became more positive. In addition to the question, this teacher encourages me to share my opinions about what we are learning in the class. In the lessons in which I used a frequent transition between safety and accountability, contribution was made by all members of the class. These activities helped to cultivate a safe classroom environment in which students were willing to contribute to class discussion, but also an environment in which students knew and expected to be held accountable for their ideas. I observed that when students were aware that they were to be held accountable, they rehearsed and discussed their ideas at a higher level of thinking than pre-intervention. As such, not only did the amount of contribution to class discussion by all members of the class increase, the number of higher order responses also increased. In addition to this data, differences between the pre-intervention student perception survey and post-intervention student perception survey suggest that collaborative learning may have had a positive impact on the learning environment, as students noticed a change in learning strategies used, as well as a requirement to share their opinions in class. Although this survey did not explicitly ask questions relating to feelings of safety and accountability, inferences can still be drawn from this data. However, no observable difference was made between pre-intervention and post-intervention higher order thinking contributions. I intend to further analyse the data I've collected against the specific learning strategies used in order to attempt to explain this finding in. As such, future research could explore which collaborative learning strategies may best encourage higher order thinking in the classroom. Additionally, future research could explore whether the implementation of collaborative learning could also improve. My observation is that embedding collaborative learning into lesson sequences has empowered students to take ownership over their own learning. This has shifted the focus from teacher-led learning to student-led learning. After explicit teaching of group work skills, students in this class have cultivated a safe learning environment in which all opinions and ideas are respected and valued. Collaborative learning has contributed to giving my students agency and voice to discuss the issues affecting their lives. Thank you for listening.